Welcome back. This morning we have with us Commissioner of the Police Department, Mr. Chester Williams. I think this will be such an interesting conversation considering the recent sensitivity that the public has been in considering the crimes that has been occurring. We just had a conversation just before we came on air where he was saying the public may have not really considered that the crime has actually fallen. And I'd like to open with that, Commissioner. Of course, I'm not here to mush any corns. I'm actually a fan of your work. And I'd like to hear your perspective on the statistics so far in 2019 of where crime has been.
Well, good morning to both of you,
Good morning.
ladies, and good morning to your viewers across the country, and even those who may be watching online, wherever part of the world they may be.
Yeah.
Yes, we know that crime is a concern for everybody.
Yeah.
And over the past few weeks, we have been hearing a lot about crime, and that crime is on the increase. Now, I am not going to take away how anybody feels about the situation, because if you were not a victim of crime last year and you are a victim of crime this year, to you, crime is up. And so those persons who are of the belief that crime is up and out of control, they have a right to feel that way. Our job as the police is to present the facts and the statistics, where we compared them comparing to last year and even previous years. And I can tell you that the statistics for this year is looking much better than last year's statistics, as well as 2017 and 2016 statistics. It is really down compared to those 3 years.
But can we just, I don't want to lose the opportunity, because when you say these statistics very broadly, people want to know what you're talking about. And so I know there's a categorization that the police uses. It's very different from how the public perceives crime. You have your murders, you have your major crimes. Go through those categories, and please, because I know you said you have the 6 months statistics available.
We have different categories of major crimes.
Yes.
What we normally try to follow are the major crimes. We don't really follow the minor harm, wounding, indecent words, and those sort of things. We look at the category of murder, robbery, burglaries, theft, rape, and unlawful sexual intercourse. Those are the main categories of crime that we would classify as major crimes, and so those are the ones that we would normally follow. Yes, as I was saying that.
So you're saying all of these categories are down 6 months into 2019?
19 compared to the first 6 months for the previous 3 years.
So let's use the category of murder. Where are we 6 months in?
I don't really like to call numbers, because sometimes I call numbers and people don't believe.
You released the 3 month statistics, but we haven't gotten the 6.
At the end of June 2019, murders are down by 16 compared to the same period last year.
Okay.
Yeah, so that represents like 18 point something %.
Okay. Now, from our count here, because you know the media tries to keep a track as well, we're above 60. Safely, I'll say above 60 6 months in.
Yeah. It's 69, 6 months.
It's 69. Yeah. Here's the thing. I know that murder is murder and manslaughter is manslaughter. But violent crime that leads to a death is the same for regular citizens. So if we use the example of the taxi man that was killed, that won't be classified as murder, because the postmortem says the vehicle crushed him versus the stab wounds that he received in a robbery on doing his duty. But it evokes the same amount of fear and lack of sense of security. So when we talk major crimes and we go down to these minute, down to the numbers, but when we look at what each individual violent crime does in how we feel and our perception of the work of the police department, the security of the country, it's two different gauges that we're using.
Yes, and I understand where you're coming from, but the law is a law, and at this time I would not preempt how that matter will be classified.
Yeah.
That will be done by the DPP after she have looked at all the evidence. And similarly, if you have a situation in a house where a husband and a wife quarrels and one kill the other, how you expect the police to have control over that? Look at the situation in Kayo, where two female fighting over a man. One came home and find the other one at home with the man, and she stabbed him. How could we control that? That is a murder. How could we control that? The situation with the two guys at Kana Western Avenue and the Cemetery Road, where one was trying to force the other to join a gang and he refused and he ended up killing the person.
Yeah.
How could we control that? So if you look at the types of murders that have been occurring, they're not things that the police can readily prevent per se.
Yeah.
Again, you look at the 5 persons who were killed at the sea. How could we prevent that? The other 2 in San Pedro, we did all we could have to try and save Mr. Graniel, but he decided to go out. What else could we have done? So there are many things that are occurring that the police have no control over. But at the end of the day, we have a responsibility still to see what we can do to restore that sense of safety that people so rightly deserve.
Absolutely.
Right? But
and
equally,
you touched on one of your examples where you spoke of a young man who didn't want to join a gang. You know, you have recently spoke of wanting to crack down on the situation of gangs in this country. Commissioner, I believe you were here, and we'd had attorneys as well joining us talking about the change in the latest change in the legislation, really ensuring that the penalties for gang involvement would be stringent enough to dissuade people from getting engaged. We have seen, what is it, about 20 people go before the courts for these charges. If it was so necessary to change the law to ensure that you can have a punitive effect for young men or young women who are involved in gang activity, why aren't we using it?
I don't think I'm the one to answer that question, because we are using it, as you have rightly said. We have charged a number of persons under that legislation that has some very serious penalties. But when they go to court, the magistrate, by law, can use their discretion, and they use their discretion, and instead of imposing a custodial sentence, they impose a fine. We have no control over that. We are doing our part to investigate the gangs, and I'm telling you, these investigations are very tedious. It took us over 6 months to compile all the relevant evidence that we need to be able to prove to the court that these young men are gang members. And at the end of the investigation, once we have the evidence, then we charge and they go before the court. That is out of our hands then. But from the police standpoint, we have charged, I would want to think, about 28 of them. And we are working currently on another amount that we'll be charging very shortly. But there's only so much that we can do. We don't control the courts. There's a separation of power where the judiciary is separate from the executive, and so we cannot meddle into the work of the judiciary. And I'm not going to criticize or condemn the judiciary, because at the end of the day, the law gives them a certain discretion that they can exercise, and that's what they're doing.
So this experience, what has it taught you? And if you really want to ensure that the changes in the law are effective for the purpose that it was put in place, would it then not then mean that perhaps in 6 months of investigative work that there's still a lot more work to do?
Yeah, I don't think that there is still a lot more work to do, because we investigated and we got sufficient to have been able to establish that they were gang members. In terms of going forward, we cannot give up. We're hoping that we can continue to investigate even those who have been charged, and hopefully if they go back before the court with a second offense under the gang law, that the court is going to look at it differently and then impose the custodial sentence. So we're not going to give up on it. It's a lot that we need to do, and as a police department, we're committed to do all we can to ensure the safety of our Belizeans.
Commissioner, what is your current strategy in addressing, because you are right, and I want to be absolutely fair. There are different types of crimes that we see. We see where some crimes of passion take place, and some that are totally unrelated to any of the gang activity. But you have consistently been trying to address the issue of gangs and the subsequent crimes that we see from their involvement. What is your current strategy to address this?
Well, for me, when we look at the persons that the gang are recruiting, there are a lot of young persons.
Yes.
And I have seen where I have been criticized even by people who are considered to be, or who should be reasonable people or reasonable thinking people, over the fact that I announced the enforcement of the curfew law. I even saw one person say that I have no legal authority to enforce a curfew. But I try to remain positive and above the fray, in the sense that I know where my authority comes from. And I would want to direct those who believe that the police have no authority to the Declaration of Curfew Regulation, Belize City Child Protection Act of 1998. And that clearly states that any person, parent or guardian, who allows a child to loiter, wander or suffer in any park, street or public place between the hours of 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. commits an offense.
I just want to touch, though, because this was an effort that you had attempted previously.
We did it before, and it worked.
How did it work?
Yes,
Marlene, you know the time when we enforced that curfew?
Yes.
For the first 6 months when I was in Belize City, from July to December 2015, we only had 8 murders on Southside Belize City. That's the lowest murder count we've ever had for Southside Belize City in a 6 months period.
But the difference now is you will be taking in parents. I mean no offense here, Commissioner, but I'm really curious. Looking on the perspective of a single parent, I'm a single mother and I have 4 kids. I work at Chowsan Palace, and of course, yes, I work there. Figuratively, I work there.
I'm just joking.
I obviously cannot afford a babysitter, and I have long shifts. My oldest child is taking care of my younger children. Of course, there is no guarantee that my oldest child will do the best to protect my children. So they may be wandering on the streets. Do you go and take me to the police station because I'm trying to make a living to take care of my children because they're wandering?
It's a tough situation, but at the end of the day, the law is the law. And while, yes, you do have a responsibility to work and take care of your children, your greatest responsibility is to ensure that those kids are safe while you're at work. And so if it is that you are going to leave them in the hands of someone who you're not sure is capable enough to take care of them, then you are being neglectful, and you should be dealt with. Now, we have revised how we're going to deal with the situation. When we dealt with it in 2015, we were taking the children to the police station, and then the parents would come and get the child, and from there we get the process going. Now, there were some quarters that have some difficulty with that, i.e. UNICEF and the Human Development, in the sense that they were saying that, oh, we were penalizing the child for the neglect of the parents. And to some extent, I do agree with them, because then if as a parent you are responsible enough, then your child will not be on the streets after hours. And so, as the law rightly said, it is the parent that commits the offense, not the child. And so what we're doing this time... So
that's why we see this shift now in taking in the parents instead. But my question is this: what happens to these children?
No, that's what I was going to say just now. We have looked at it more in depth, and if it is that we take the parent to the police station, then that might leave the child at home.
You have an unsupervised child.
So what we are doing now is that we're not taking the parent, we're getting the parent particulars, name, address, everything about the parent, and then we're going to summon the parent to go to court. Right?
On neglect?
Yes, and then we're going to report the matter to Human Development, who will then, by law, have a responsibility to investigate what is taking place in the home that causes the child to be on the streets after hours. And like I said before, this is not something that the police can do alone. Every organization or every sector of the community has a role to play, and it is expected that they must play that role.
Yeah. Commissioner, what is the driver behind this latest move? You know, you spoke of the last curfew reducing the murder count for 6 months down to 8 in Belize City. But you know, if you have a cut and you put a Band-Aid over it, you don't see the bleeding for a while, but the bleeding continues. and the bleeding in the streets of Belize City has continued. We have been seeing shootings, murders, violent crimes after the last curfew. So maybe it calmed things down periodically, but it's not a long-term strategy if we are to use the very same example of the last curfew.
Marlene,
I'm just speaking.
I don't expect that you will think that the police will have the answer to cure the ills of a society. As I've said before, fighting crime spans beyond the police, it spans beyond the government. It must be a community effort. You know, historically, the community used to police itself, you know, and not the police the community. The police would normally just come in after something occur and deals with the situation. But we have transformed where the society has not been able to police itself. So police have now become more proactive in addressing the issue of crime. And when you and I were growing up, it took a village to raise us. Now, not even your home can raise you, because if you live in a home with your sister or your brother and they have a child, and you try to correct their child, they eat at you. Imagine now somebody out there trying to correct their children. It's the same thing that they do. I couldn't go home and tell my mother, Miss So-and-so lashed me, because I would get more lashing.
On top.
In today's day, a child go home and tell the mother, Miss So-and-so look for me too hard, and mommy they come with vengeance. So we find that children today cannot be corrected or disciplined by anybody, including the parent, because sometimes the parent themselves are afraid to discipline the child. So these children are growing up today with no guidance and no discipline, and that is what breeds the society that we're living today. So we have to look at it as a community effort in order for us to ensure that we have a long-term solution to our crime problem.
It requires
a change of behavior.
And I hear what you say, because I know clearly many people will scratch their heads sometimes and say times have changed.
Yeah.
The difference is that you are the lead of the police department in this country, and there is a duality that you have in prevention and in being able to address. And so when you come up with a strategy like charging or going after parents for neglecting the children, for having them out of the house after hours, my question is, what is the end goal in being able to reduce the level of crime that we're seeing and to restore, if just a bit, the sense of security that citizens can have?
Marlene, again, when you do an analysis of the crime that have occurred over the past, not only this year, but even last year, you will see that many of the crime that occur in the nighttime are committed by underage children. So you find that when the children are roaming the streets at night, they are recruited by the senior gang members to go and commit crime. And the reason for that is because the senior gang members are well known. So if they go and commit the crime, it will be easy to identify them. These young children that they are using now are not known. They are newcomers to the scene. They're not known by police. They don't alert the police per se, because the police see a child, police don't bother with them. And so you find that they use the children to go and commit shootings, murders, robberies, burglaries. The four main categories of violent crime. These kids are being used for. And if it is that we can remove the child from the streets after 8 p.m., it takes away that ammunition from the gang members that they can use to go and commit a crime. You
know, you are very well aware of what the immediate response to that is.
Well, I'm not sure.
And that is, and I will give it to you because it's fact. The crimes that we see, it broke the tradition a long time ago. You have children being shot, getting an ice cream at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, a milkshake at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You have robberies taking place right at this hour when people are moving around for work. We had a shootout downtown at 4 or 5 in the evening. Thankfully, it wasn't a school day because the kids would have been walking on the street. So our crimes are not relegated to nighttime activities when you want to enforce this curfew.
Marlene,
crime is widespread.
I beg to differ if you listen to what I said earlier. And we have the analysis. majority of our murders and robberies and burglaries took place at night time after 8 p.m. That is the truth. I'm not saying that all take place around that time, but the majority do. And if it is that we can prevent one, we would prevent something. And I stand behind the decision to implement the curfew. I think that is the right thing to do. I don't think that any right-thinking society believes that a child under the age of 16 should be on the streets after 8 p.m. at night.
So you're using 16 as your cutoff?
That is the law, 16.
Okay. So how long will you have the curfew running for?
That is a law. That should not have any period. That should
But
continue.
the last time it was periodic.
Because there was a change in command. And the new commanders who took over didn't see the need to continue it. But the curfew should be continuous. And I have put together a curfew team in Belize City. And that team will work from 6. I won't say what time they stop work. From 6 in the evening they start to work. And they are responsible to ensure that every child who is found on the streets after 8 p.m., that the parent of that or those children are dealt with.
What you're doing, and I hear, I can understand some of the motives behind it, is getting parents to ensure that they're doing what they're responsible for,
And
which is
that's what
taking care of their children.
That's what I'm hoping, Marla. We don't have to, we will not find ourselves having to be arresting or taking no parent to court. That they will see the need to keep their children at home, that we will have to take nobody to court.
So the system is you see a child on the streets around 8 o'clock, you pick them up and you take them home.
Yes.
What if they don't tell you where they live? What if they're reluctant?
Then we take them to the police station and we get human development involved.
Yeah. And you're not, in conversation with the ministry, you're not concerned of overwhelming that system that is already overwhelmed, I'm sure
No,
you know?
it won't overwhelm me. No.
Okay. So I want to go back to my question because I don't feel like I've heard from you the answer. This is one strategy to address the crime situation. Commissioner, even at 69, if we have the exact number for the second half of the year, which I know all of us hope, including you, or I should say especially you, will not be the case. If we're at 140 more murders at the end of the year, it'll be less than last year, which would indicate a downward trend. But crime can't be looked at on a year-to-year basis, and the media and the public is as guilty of doing that. It's an overall number. Our murder rate per capita is extremely high, and it has been for a long time. We have not been able to bring it down to the lowest levels within the Caribbean region, or even the global perspective. So there has to be some informed strategy as to how we can start to move this number in the right direction. And a minus or plus of 6 not do very much to change the rate.
I do agree to some extent, but I want to emphasize a point. It is not the police that reduces crime. It takes the entire community. Police cannot change behavioral problems. Behavioral problems are addressed in the home. It is where it starts from. And I even see some saying about police officers who behave in a certain way. Those police officers that we have that behave in that manner are raised in a home as well. It just so happens that we inherit some of them in the police department.
But you employ them? Where's your due diligence?
You know, Marlene, there's no perfect organization. We do our vetting and these sort of things, but some will fall through the cracks. We have to accept that. That happens all over the globe, right? But at the end of the day, it will take a behavioral change. Yes, the police, we have a job and we're going to do that job. I can tell you we have been doing a lot. And as a reporter in the news, I'm sure that you can report, you have report on the level of successes that we have had over the past couple of months. And that continues. But if we do not find a way to change the behavior of our society, then it will never be what we want it to be. And this phenomenon is not only unique to Belize. I'm sure you saw the video with the commissioner in Trinidad, how frustrated he is. And there is rising crime in Barbados, quite little Barbados, that used to average 5 to 10 murders a year. They're now at 39 for this year. And they are now calling on the FBI for assistance. Jamaica that has so many different programs.
In the region,
yeah, Jamaica is still right up there. St. Kitts, a little island, right up there. So it is a phenomenon across the Caribbean, and it is something that has to do with the behavior of our young people that needs to change, and the change must start at home. And that is why, Marlene, I have always said that we need to focus on the next generation that is coming up. And that is what had us doing that mentorship program.
Yeah.
And you see, these are things that we are doing that we don't have to do.
And well, I was
Right.
going to get to that because I think what you are saying is absolutely true. It is a multifaceted approach. There are different people that have to be involved. Crime comes from many different issues, from the poverty to the lack of parenting to even the exposure to other crimes.
Yes, that's true.
So if I'm 16 years old and I've seen shooting my whole life, that's a part of my norm.
Yeah.
So where the police role comes in is being able to minimize and, more importantly, Commissioner, being able to have consequences for poor decisions. And you know we got to go there because we always go there to talk about the number of people who are actually convicted for crimes. We've spoke of the investigation work of the police department, but clearly it is an area that needs to be reinforced.
Marlene,
Can you admit that?
Partially. Let me be clear again. Police do investigation. I'm not going to say that our investigation is the best. But when you look at the failure of cases before the court, majority of the time, it has nothing to do with the police investigation or the competence of the prosecutor. It has to do primarily, 90% of the time, because of the failure of the witness or witnesses to come to court and testify, and because of that, the DPP office cannot proceed with the matter, and so another process is entered, or it is dismissed by the court. So again,
that's one of the scenarios. Commissioner, I've spoken to
that is the
families
majority.
where the only interaction they've had after their loved one was killed with the police department was the day the person was killed.
Well, maybe,
And
Marlene, I would
I
agree.
want to ask you, have you ever looked at how many cold cases, unsolved murders we have in this country where no one was charged?
I don't know if you have a camera in my office, but just yesterday I met with Mr. Maivet and the CIB people, and I told him to put together a team to look at some of the cold cases, because I personally believe that with a little bit more effort, some of them can be solved. And so the team was put together yesterday, headed by Mr. Romero, and they'll be looking at a number of cold cases to see if we can solve them. I think a little bit more effort will do, and sometimes to go back and re-interview witness or witnesses, they might have that will to want to assist. But again, an investigation, Marlene, is only as good as the witnesses who participate, and a court case is only as good as the witnesses who go before the court to testify. And these are areas that we need to improve in. We need to have more participation from the public in the judicial system to ensure that we get the end results, that is to hold criminals accountable for the crime that they have committed.
So this is such an interesting conversation. I'm sorry, I'm such a sponge right now. I'm just soaking it all in, and I just want to take it back a little. So you believe strongly that the solution to a lot of these crimes, apparently, that take place in the wee hours of the night are done by children. Commissioner, I'm wondering if you're thinking of it, because the way I'm looking at it is we're kind of just tackling the surface. What are you doing to deal with the root of the problem? Because essentially, as you said earlier, it's actually the older ones that are influencing the younger. It's also the family. And I know that it's not your job to fix the homes that these children are living in. Of course, you cannot do everything, and you keep on repeating it. And I understand that completely. But what is it that you would like to share with the audiences even as potential solutions, apart from the curfew, of course? Because I'm here thinking, what could we do to reduce gang members from really influencing these young children? What strategies do you believe could be implemented to further reduce this?
Parents need to become more responsible and more accountable for their children. That is one. And again, enforcing the gang law is critical. But as I've said before, there is only so much that we can do. And we are doing our best to hold gang members accountable for their actions, but there is only so much that we can do. The piece of gang legislation for me is very important, and to me, it do have teeth.
Yeah.
But we need to ensure that the court system use the teeth for the purpose for which it was placed there. And until we can see that occurring, then gang members will feel uncomfortable, and they will understand that there is no benefit in becoming a gang member. If you continue to have a society where gang members believe that there is benefit and that the judicial system or the prison cannot hold them, then they'll forever want to be gang members. Let us look at what the president in Salvador is doing. And we have to look at that as well, because it might have some effect in Belize in terms of the Maras, Salvatruchas, and MS-13, who will flee to Belize because of what is happening in Salvador. And so we must ensure that at home, we have stringent measures to deal with gang members that they will not want to see Belize as a safe haven. But again, as I said, there is only so much that the police can do, and I'm not going to say that we're doing all we can, because as I said to my officers, I believe that we can do more. And even myself, who I do a lot, I hardly sleep, because I'm always thinking on what next and what to do and try to think ahead of the criminals. But I do believe that I can do more too. And
do you think that this will affect your community policing efforts?
No, it will not affect our community policing efforts. And again, you spoke of long term. The police department is the only organization that has a youth mentorship program that runs for extended period of time, and we have over 160 children in that program, and these are children who are from vulnerable communities, children who are at risk, and we took them under our wings, and we will have them for 6 months every Saturday. And again, these are things that we are doing to see how we can help.
And it is an excellent program. I wouldn't deny that much. You know, we talk about crime very often when we see a large number of murders, and I feel that we always hear kind of ad hoc reactions. There's a spike, we implement a particular new strategy. Has there been, from the Ministry of National Security or even from your office as the commissioner, a concerted effort to put together a definitive plan with the aims and objectives as to how we are going to get to a point where we start to see a safer society in Belize? Have you hired consultants, accessed grant funding, been able to get people with the technical expertise to come in and say, here's where you need to reinforce your department, here's how you train them properly, here's how we go to court and prosecute successfully?
Marlene,
what is the plan, Commissioner?
We do have a 2019-2020 action plan that is geared at addressing crime and reducing crime. And
this is created from your office?
Yes, and I believe that it is working. And we do have consultants. We have consultants in forensic, we have consultants in policing, we have consultants in prosecution. But we can bring all the consultants we want in this country. If we do not change our behavior, it will not change our crime problem. Jamaica, Trinidad has so many consultants. They have received fundings from different organizations, grants to address crime, and the issue persists. It's a behavioral problem that we must address, and we must start to address it in the home.
But where we have the opportunity versus a Trinidad or Jamaica is that we are a small country with a small population, concentrated as well in a small city. So real effective change can be seen in a society like Belize because of all these factors. So I want to ask you, because to be fair, I'll say one thing. I know that it is not for a lack of trying. There are different actions that the police department has taken over the years, all with the very same goal in mind, to be able to reduce crime. We haven't been able to see the type of reduction that makes us feel that it's successful. But from your perspective, if you had carte blanche for what would be necessary for the police department in terms of tools, skills, whatever,
I don't know if
what would make
I don't know if I
your
want to answer that
efforts-
question because what
Is
would
it
be
a more
necessary?
professional force? Is it a more trained force? Is it better equipment? Is it
Marlene,
what is it?
as I said before, and I stick to that, we have a behavioral problem in our society that needs to be addressed. The police cannot go into people's homes and tell them how to raise their children. We have to start from there. And until we really and truly accept that, we're not going anywhere. And what needs to be done? Adapt Salvador method. Lock up all of them.
The president of Salvador is a transformational leader. He is unique in many different ways,
Marlene,
and that comes from the top.
When you look at the more civil and peaceful societies, let's look at Singapore example. When the prime minister became prime minister back then, Singapore was out of control. Murders and crimes were rampant. And he took a hardline approach in addressing it. People at first were unhappy because they were saying that, oh, it was violating people's rights and this and that. But today, you look at the benefit of it. Singapore is now one of the most peaceful countries on earth. But you have to have something drastic needs to be done to ensure that gang members and those who are involved in crime see and understand that there is no benefit to be involved in crime or gangs.
But drastic doesn't always mean violation of human rights.
Well,
when Giuliani cracked down, when Mayor Giuliani in New York cracked down on crime, when they were in their crime spate, they went with quality of life crimes.
Yes.
Every single minor infraction had a consequence because it meant that people start to learn that they...
Including making sure that children were not on the streets, that
Yes.
gang members do not
Yes.
recruit them.
Yes. So my question is, but this is, we're saying the same thing, that there has to be action taken. But the only action you have offered to us so far in this conversation is ensuring that children are in their home
And
by 8 o'clock.
I've also said to you, Marlene, that we continue to look at the gang laws and we continue to go at gang members. The police have been doing a lot. I told about our mentorship program that is
Yes.
geared. So don't say all they tell
And
you
it's
about that
commendable.
one thing.
Yes, but
there's
in
several
terms of
there's several
intervention-
solutions that I have offered to you.
strategies.
Intervention, we work with CYDP. I've given CYDP additional police officers to do interventions. They're out on the streets every day doing interventions. There's a lot that we're doing, Marlene. But like I said, you cannot expect that the police will have the silver bullet to solve these issues. It spans way beyond the police.
And I don't think that that is what is being said here. No one expects, there's a responsibility overall. You have to talk about the poverty that people are living in.
That is not
the
my
education.
responsibility.
And I know, and that's why I'm saying, you have to talk about the education that children are attaining. You have to talk about the psychological impacts of people who've been living in gang areas or in violent areas over time, or if they had violence in their homes. There are a lot of other issues. Those are completely outside of the scope of the police department, but within your scope.
But we still try to help. We have a scholarship program that we give to underprivileged children as well. So there are a number of things that we continue to do to help in areas that we should not be helping, all because we want to try to be a part of the solution. And so that people don't only see the police as, oh, they come to arrest us, but rather to see us as persons who care and want to see betterment for the underprivileged children.
Well, I'll say this much. No matter what people think of the police, if they're in a bind, you'll still be the first one they call.
That is
Which
true.
is why no one has any motive of seeing the police department fail.
Yeah.
Your success is always in everyone's best interest. So let me just close off this way. The public is watching. I know you're very well in tuned that the public has concerns. Not necessarily, some are concerned about the curfew, some are mixed about it. But what do you say to the people who simply no longer feel safe in their own homes or in their own neighborhoods as to what the police department is ensuring that they're doing to help us have just a little bit of a sounder sleep at night or a safer feeling at home?
Marlene, one of the best solution to crime is community participation. I want to urge every community to see what they can do to be a part of the solution. If it is that you live in a community and you're not safe, within your own communities, you can put together things that could make you feel safer. We could look at neighborhood watch groups where you become each other's keepers. Because I'm sure you'd appreciate that we don't have police to put in every corner of the city or the country. Yes, we may go in and do patrols and then we go back out because we have to service a wider area. And criminals do watch how the police move. But if criminals should see that if they come into a particular area, that the people within that area are so organized, they're so mobilized, and that will make any criminal think twice to want to go into that area to commit crime. But if they see that the people in a community are not together, they don't care about each other's, then you will find that that will occur. They'll strike here and then nobody thought they will strike there and then it becomes rampant. So for me, I want to encourage people to see how they can work with us. And once you decide to put together a neighborhood watch group, we are going to assign police officers to work with you in that group, to advise you and to tell you what can be done to make your area more safer. We want to also look at the issue of putting up surveillance system. Again, that will help a lot in terms of deterring crime. Once the criminal, well, not all of them, but for the most part, if they see that there is surveillance in the area, that will, to some extent, deter them. Or like she said, will be hesitant to want to go and commit crime. So there are several things that they can do. And again, you see something, you say something, right? You don't wait until the criminals strike before you want to say something. Because you might not be able to say something then. So you see a strange person coming into your neighborhood, alert the police and let the police know, and then we'll see how we can go in to try and deal with the situation before something happens that we may all regret.
And lastly, recommendations to people that changes they can make to ensure their own safety.
Well, again, always ensure that you know your surroundings, and if it is that you are moving around, try to have someone with you, especially if you're going to remote areas. Like for businesses that constantly get robbed, change the way how you do things in terms of how you keep your cash, who knows where you keep your cash, what time you go to the bank. You try to
not be predictable.
Exactly. You change your pattern of how you do things. And again, when we look at people who go out at night time, you find that people go drink, get drunk, don't know where they are, don't know what they're doing, and sometimes they too become victims of crime. And again, I would say that if you go out and drink to the limit where you maintain consciousness, you maintain that sense of alertness, that no one will be able to take advantage of you. And if you know that you live in an area that is isolated, you try to get a taxi to take you home rather than walking, especially if you know you have issues. Now, Marlene, there are many people out there who have or are receiving threats, and they take the threats lightly, and then it eventually happens. Then after they have been killed or hurt, then you hear that this was happening. My thing again, if it is that you are getting any kind of threat from anybody, do not take the threat lightly.
We should report it to the police.
Report it to the police, and then we will see what we can do to neutralize it. Even if it comes by way of Facebook, still report it, and we'll see what we can do to assist you to neutralize that threat. Do not wait to see if the person will execute, because that might be too late for you.
Maybe fatal.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you coming in and being able to have this conversation with us, and best of luck.
Thank you too, Marlene. It's always a pleasure.
All right. We're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we'll be shedding light on how to build the perfect ambience for your parties. Please stay tuned.